As you guys know, Charlie Rose, consummate newsman. Depends on how old you are if you're watching the show, but most of the people who watch the show around my age, you would know who Charlie Rose is. Charlie Rose has pretty much interviewed everybody. Politician, celebrity. Charlie Rose has been around forever. Charlie Rose got busted for preying on the women in his office. Interestingly to note, guess who showed up in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book? And that just showed up in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book. Has a special passage around that. This is interesting. Depraved, but interesting. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. This video is not going to be all that long. And I made this as an episode because there are probably going to be a lot of these, seeing as the number of names that are in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book. And as that case falls out, I strongly suspect there is going to be more fallout in this case. Meaning, what is taking place right now with Jeffrey Epstein is not going to be in and of itself. Let me say it that way, in and of itself. How am I saying this? Jeffrey Epstein has all sorts of political and media connections. Those connections show up in his Black Book. Jeffrey Epstein had a plane, not to mention an island. And it seems that this level of pedophilia and abuse may exceed him. Meaning, it's hard to know who knew about this. If Michael Wolff is right and Donald Trump was the one that turned Epstein in, the question becomes, how long did Donald Trump know before he turned him in? And not just that, who else knew? I am not of mind that nobody knew. I strongly suspect they probably knew and just didn't say anything about it. Case in point, Charlie Rose. And by the way, not just didn't know anything about, but possibly involved themselves in. Meaning, Alan Dershowitz is being called into question on this point. Dershowitz is saying, I didn't have anything to do with this, but they're accusing him of this. I guess I'm making a point. All of these people that Jeffrey Epstein was around, I don't believe that nobody knew. I don't believe everybody knew. It's not that. But I would imagine that people that were close within his circle knew. And not just knew, it's possible that this circle, how wide it was, might have been because they were partaking. Case in point, Charlie Rose. Charlie Rose, I'm just going to read it. This is from the New York magazine. This is a fascinating article because you get to see this kind of really nasty circle in the way that how rife with pedophilia the media and political elites might be. And it sounds gross to say that, and I know it even sounds almost conspiratorial, but how is it conspiratorial at this point? Jeffrey Epstein had all sorts of connections in the media and political space. He was all over the place. And when you're looking through his Black Book, it's like, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know that guy, I know that guy. MSNBC likes to pretend that Donald Trump is his only connection. Or Fox News like to pretend that Bill Clinton is his only connection. Fact of the matter is, both were connected to him tightly. And Donald Trump making that quote saying that Jeffrey Epstein is like young women gets across that they knew. They probably knew. They probably knew. Let's take a look at this part. Let me see if I can blow it up so you can read it. This is Charlie Rose. You learn things answering phones, and in spring of 2005, answering Charlie Rose's phone on his PBS show, you would learn that his friend Jeffrey Epstein had some recommendations to make for Charlie Rose or who he ought to hire as his next assistant. Written call logs from 2005 and 2006 show Epstein and his assistant calling dozens of times, making plans for lunch and tea at Manhattan or to try to meet up in Paris. Epstein also called with a total of 5 women's names and phone numbers. One woman was described as the world's perfect assistant. She used to work for Harvey Weinstein. He's lucky if he can get her. Another entry read, Jeffrey Epstein wants to talk to you before you call these girls. A fourth woman shows up on the manifest of Epstein jet, including on Bill Clinton's trip across Africa, and wound up working at the Clinton Foundation. Two former staffers. Remember, another Epstein's referral, a young woman not mentioned in the logs, who interned at the show. In all, Rose hired 3. Now, the interesting part here is he has a note that says, I hope Charlie Rose can get this woman. She used to work for Harvey Weinstein. She's the world's perfect assistant. Now, the moment, God, that's so gross. That's so fucking gross. Like, there were moments where Harvey Weinstein stopped a woman from leaving his office so he could masturbate in a plant and wanted her to stand there and watch. These people are depraved. There should be no millionaires and billionaires in this way, not no multimillionaires. This amount of power. Like, you do that when you don't believe the person is going to say anything, because to say anything would destroy their career. And you believe that the rest of the community either wouldn't believe you or wouldn't do anything about it. Like, the strength of the Me Too movement is to break this wall. No woman should be forced or compelled to do that. And in this particular situation, we're talking about somebody who's a pedophile. Like, it gets worse on top of worse. He's essentially serving women up to be abused, because that's literally what Charlie Rose did. Now, are you telling me that Charlie Rose didn't know this guy was this way when this guy was giving him the women to be abused? This is gross. This is so gross. Look at this part, this last part. When the woman was, the reporter contacted the woman. When I called one of these women recently, she was stunned to learn that she was one of many women Epstein recommended for the job. I was being offered up for abuse. The woman, who was 22 at the time, she worked for Rose, and helped her understand not only how her boss Rose, whom in 2017 she would accuse along with 34 other adult women of sexual harassment, had treated her, but also how the rest of the staff viewed her. Meaning, the rest of the staff, for the most part, assumed that she was, to some degree, there for that. Or at the very least was looking at her for some reason of that. That's amazing. That's amazing. She thinks she's just getting a job. Rose and Epstein is getting her for that job with this notion of abusing her when she gets that job. And you're telling me that Rose is the only one? That of all the people that's in this little black book, now that you know what you know about Jeffrey Epstein, with all of the political connections that he has, with all of the media connections that he has, do you honestly believe that Rose is the only one? And not just the only one, that the abuse, in Rose's case, were adult women, but that abuse stayed with adults. Again, now that you know what you know about Epstein. Look, these videos are going to be demonetized. I do these videos because, honestly, I have to be honest, I am shocked as shit at the story. I just am. Look, I assume that there are pedophiles in this world. I assume it. Probabilistically, of course. But this guy had connections all over the place. And from the standpoint of media and politicians, it seems that there's a percentage of them that had to know. And within the context of the percentage that knew, the question becomes how many of them? And not just how many of them. Was it one of those things where they knew this was the guy to get kids from? Kind of like, you would know the guy to get your pot from or something like that? Like, is it one of those things where it just kind of grew to be something that was more than just him abusing, to where people knew and engaged with him in those terms? Hey, I saw that you were smoking pot. Is there any way I can get some of that? Yeah, I can get you some of that. It's going to be $30. But in this case, not pot, but they see him with young women, in which case they inquire as to how did they get some of that. There are a list of names in this black book. And knowing what we know now about him and Rose, oh my God. There's Chuck Schumer, Maria Shriver, Peggy Siegel, Rodney Slater, Peter Soros, Kevin Spacey, Carolyn Stanbury, Kenneth Starr. Kenneth Starr goes so far as to fight on behalf of not having charges against Epstein. Let me repeat that. Kenneth Starr lobbies to not have charges on Epstein for what Epstein was doing. This is kind of what I mean when I said this is kind of a salacious bunch. This gets really gross. And when this trial takes place, and as this trial proceeds, it will be interesting to see what falls out of this black book. George Stephanopoulos is being just more than people in his black book, but accomplices or people who just knew and didn't say. Bill Richardson, Louis Ranieri, Carol Radziwill, Tom Pritzker, Felix Posen, Bob Pittman, Alberto Pinto, Stephen Penter. I mean, look at this. Rupert Murdoch, George Mitchell, Robert Meister. One of the things that came up that Acosta said was that the guy was intelligence, that he was, some kind of, that this was above his pay grade and that to give him a light sentence. This case is weird. This case is extremely weird. I'm going to follow this case because I find this case to be disturbing, but more than disturbing, strange. There should be no billionaires. And part of this kind of, and I know this has less to do with him being a billionaire. I guess my mind is going more towards the power distribution or the power angle. Also, there's a question of why is this guy interacting with all of these political figures? Why is this guy on like these kind of, what is it, Council of Foreign Relations? Like, this is so strange. Follow this case. Stay tuned to this. And we'll see what falls out. Thanks all. You can move to super chat just before I leave. Fair enough. Shit. Yeah, man, this case is bizarre, to say the least. And I have to think that there are a lot of people sweating bullets right now, including his own attorney. I can't think of his name, Dershowitz. Because if you remember, Dershowitz was being implicated in this. Dershowitz said, I didn't do it, I kept my underwear on. As if him having his underwear on is a defense. Does this make you think Pizzagate? No, look, I think Pizzagate was somewhat of a conspiracy theory. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a circle of elites where this happens. I mean, look at the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, pedophilia it's rampant in the Catholic Church. But in this case, you have millionaires and billionaires with all sorts of power at their disposal. And somewhat of a circle or bubble in order to keep that stuff kind of private within themselves. Is it impossible for that to happen? No, it's not. All sorts of organizations of energy can take place, just kind of evolving one moment after the next. I have no idea. In this case, this looks nasty. And if there is one person in this book that is Charlie Rose, and it's not insane to believe that there are others, stay tuned. Thanks all.